Good evening, everybody, and welcome back to a live broadcast of Real Still Sports on Spreaker Web Radio. You're listening to the wonderful James Michael Krasner. Hoping everybody had a phenomenal Mother's Day. Happy Mother's Day to all the mothers out there. You guys have made it possible for us to go about our business and have our great lives, and we aren't shit without you. But now let's get on to football. I apologize first off before I start for my previous inactivity for a couple weeks. It was finals week for me. It's funny because I blew away my pharmacy math final and over-prepared for it, but my bio final was canceled. So I'm still waiting to hear back on how the whole class went. But final grades come out in about a couple of days, so I'll know then, sooner than later. But anyways, back to football for the second time. The St. Louis Rams ultimately became the team that would draft Michael Sam. I know a lot of us were wondering. In fact, I kept checking the draft. So, when I was working now, I was following all the rounds of the draft, and I was watching the 4th, 5th, and 6th rounds to see, when is Michael Sam going to get drafted? Because I projected that he would probably get drafted in the 3rd round. So my opinion was, because I didn't do a mock draft, because I'm never right anyway, due to trades and anything. But the 3rd round was where I thought he could go, between 3rd and 5th. I didn't think he'd slip to 7th. But, I guess some teams either A, aren't ready for a gay player, or B, just, didn't think he was that good. And honestly, I don't think it was a product of the fact that he was gay. I think a lot of teams would have been absolutely fine with that. I just think it was a fact that I don't think a lot of players thought, or a lot of team executives thought he'd be good in the NFL. But anyways, the kid's a special football player. He really is. The most sacks in the SEC, which is littered with defensive players. He is the SEC Defensive Player of the Year, which he's proven that he can play football. And honestly, I don't think could have gone to a better team. And here's why. Look at all the teams that were interested in him. Giants, Ravens, I think Vikings might have been one, Bears possibly, and the Rams. I'm not sure 100%. I know Ravens and Giants were definites. But if you go ahead and you look at, who is going to offer him a free agent contract had he not been drafted, those were teams that were high in pass rushers. If you look at throughout the NFL at teams with quite a high number of pass rushers, such as in the AFC, you've got the Jets, you've got the Colts, you've got the Texans, you've got the Bengals, the Ravens. In the NFC, you've got the Giants historically, you've got, who else? The Saints try to get heavy pressure, the Rams, the Seahawks. If you look at really the situation and the schemes, there really weren't too many teams that he could have actually gone to. Because if he would have, he'd have had to start. And Sam's a great athlete and a great football player. I think he'd project better as a 3-4 linebacker than a 4-3 end. That's just my opinion. But, seeing his size, and he's not a very big guy. But I think this falls to the point where the right team had to pick him for him to be successful. And I don't think he could have gone to a better team in St. Louis. You could probably make an argument that Baltimore would have been good for him. You could have made an argument that maybe the Giants would have been good for him. But again, I just can't see those teams finding a need for him. I think he fits in perfectly in St. Louis for this particular reason. Look at the 2013 Rams. The team that finished 7-9, had one of the more underrated defenses in the league, 19th in passing, 9th in rushing, 15th in yards, 13th in points, plus 8 in turnover differential. And if you look also at the defense, that's why it's the best fit for him. Because here's why. That defense last year accumulated 53 sacks. It was one of the best defenses in the National Football League. Now, of that 53 sacks, as I get my calculator out here, hang on, I completely screwed it up. 38 were by the defensive front of Michael Brockers and Kendall Langford, who are the defensive interiors, and on the edge, Chris Long and Robert Quinn. 38-53. Anybody else feel that that is an overwhelming defensive front? Anybody else think that that's a defensive front that could just, absolutely just obliterate people and blow them off the line of scrimmage? I think it this way. You throw Michael Sam into that, you've got a real good recipe for success. Because think about it. Just go maybe a year or two into the future. Because Sam's not going to do much his first year. His second year will probably get some more cracks at the starting lineup. Actually, not the starting lineup, but cracks at being on the football field. Put him on that defense as, say, a linebacker, for say. Or just as a special designated blitz guy. Because think of who their defensive coordinators. It's Greg Williams. And what do Greg Williams defenses do? For one, they get bounties, but that's a whole different story. Me being a Saints fan, I don't like him personally, but as a defensive coordinator, I know he's a badass coordinator. He's badass at getting his guys to quarterback. But think of it this way. I mean, you have a defensive front that can accumulate more than 70% of your sack totals as a football team. You got to block Brockers, Langford, Long, and Quinn. If you can block those four guys, it's probably going to take your whole defensive front and probably a tight end. Who's going to cover Michael Sam? Who is going to block him? And he's quick enough that he could probably sack about 95% of the quarterbacks in the NFL. There's only a handful that will probably be able to elude him. I look at maybe Aaron Rodgers, maybe Ben Roethlisberger. I look at possibly, Russell Wilson. That's about it. Not too many guys can be able to elude Michael Sam because he's that quick. And he's strong enough to drag a quarterback to the ground. I mean, if you just look at the guy in terms of how big he is, again, he is not a very big guy. He's 6'2" and he's 261. By comparison, you look at some of the other outside linebackers in this league, such as DeMarcus Ware. He was an outside linebacker for a lot of his career. He was 6'4", 258, so a little bit taller and slimmer. You've got James Harrison, who's 6 feet, 275. And then you look at Von Miller. He's 6'3", 250. Michael Sam is the body type. Michael Sam is the body type that he can get to the quarterback as a rusher like that. Because he's quick enough, he's fast enough, and he's strong enough, and he's motivated. This guy wants to play football and wants to succeed. And I think going to this Jeff Fisher team with all these talented playmakers around him on defense, he has got so much upside and so much promise in his career. If he'd have gone to a different team without much hope on defense and he had to start, I don't think he'd do as well. And for people that's sorry about that. If you just look at how he played in the SEC, he was ferocious. He was as good of a defensive lineman as you could find in the SEC, and that's the SEC. Let's not forget, he had a better year last year than a Jadeveon Clowney did, and Clowney goes number 1 overall. In fact, I will probably be talking about Jadeveon Clowney later on. I'll be talking about him later on in a different segment. But if you look at the way the guy plays, this team, this scheme, this coaching staff, and the building they're in being in a dome, in fact that he's close to home, this guy has so much potential and he's got such a good chance at succeeding in the NFL. And all the power to him. And for the executives and people who think that he's just going to be a distraction because he's gay, it wasn't a problem at Missouri, now was it? Or else we would have heard something out of that locker room. And guess what? Not all of his players, his teammates, were, supporting of him. They accepted him. They were men. Now, if a bunch of professional athletes cannot accept a man when a bunch of 19 to 21-year-olds can, that are amateurs, then that really says something about maturity levels in this country. I would have picked, if I was in the draft and I was looking for a possible edge rusher, I'd have picked him. And if anyone was going to comment on sexuality, I said, I'm not here to talk about his sexuality. You know why? Because he is who he is, and he's a great man. He should not be judged by that. He should be judged by the content of his character. I will talk about him football related right now. That's how I would handle it. And people are saying, oh, it's kind of being blatant. Not really. Not really. Guy's a great guy. Great football player. He's going to be a great player in this league. You just watch. All right, guys, coming up next, it's going to take a little bit of delay because Spreaker likes to time out and take breaks. I will be talking about Johnny Manziel and Jadeveon Clowney. I was wrong. I had a bold prediction state. I thought Manziel would go number 1 to Houston. I thought they'd take him. And Jadeveon Clowney go number 1 overall to Houston. And I'll also be talking about NFL teams and which teams upgrade and which teams downgraded due to their draft status. So stay tuned and enjoy it.